In the quiet solitude of a war tent, Marcus Aurelius sat beneath a flickering oil lamp. Outside, the Roman legions slept, and beyond them lay the uncertain terrain of tomorrow's conflict. Yet in the emperor's hand was not a sword, but a scroll, his own words etched in ink and agony. He had tasted rejection in ways few men ever would, not just on the battlefield, but in the silence of the Senate, in the betrayal of trusted allies, in the cold absence of gratitude after acts of virtue. And yet he did not crumble. He did not retreat. He wrote, "Reject me," he might have thought, "and I will use it to become stronger than before." Rejection, for Marcus, was not a wall. It was a mirror. It didn't block his path. It reflected his weaknesses, his pride, his assumptions, and invited him to master them. That is the first lesson. When you are rejected, you are handed a raw truth. Most people run from it. The Stoic sees it as the beginning of mastery. When the world says no, the average man internalizes it. He sees himself as lesser. But Marcus understood a deeper law, that rejection is rarely about the self. It's about timing, perception, fear in others, the architecture of power, the illusions people cling to. Rejection isn't personal. It's a test of your relationship with your own worth. It's an invitation to stop chasing acceptance and begin commanding respect. He understood something most of us miss, that the human mind, including the minds of those who reject you, can be maneuvered. Not with arrogance, but with clarity. This is where reverse psychology begins to unfold. The moment you detach from the desire to be accepted, you become irresistible. The less you chase validation, the more others wonder why you're not chasing it. Curiosity replaces dismissal. Distance breeds value. The very act of not needing approval becomes your strongest influence. Marcus Aurelius trained himself to expect nothing, to demand nothing, to never beg. And that alone made him unforgettable. The second lesson: when someone shuts a door in your face, don't knock again. Sit quietly outside. Let them hear your silence. Let them feel the absence of your energy. Most people react to rejection with more noise. The Stoic responds with presence, calm, unshaken, unmoved. Years later, this same principle would be echoed by every master strategist, from Machiavelli to Lincoln. Silence, restraint, withdrawal, these are not signs of weakness. They are the weapons of those who control their emotions. And emotions are the true battleground of rejection. There's a Roman story about how Marcus once sent an order to a senator who despised him. The senator returned the message with a sneer. He expected retaliation. Instead, Marcus promoted him. Not out of forgiveness, but power. That's lesson 3. Reverse psychology isn't about games. It's about proving that you are not emotionally bound to anyone's perception of you. When people see you elevate those who reject you, they begin to question their own behavior. They lose control. You gain it. What Marcus grasped so deeply was that rejection often stems from fear. People reject what they don't understand. They reject what challenges their beliefs. And they reject what reflects their own inadequacies. When someone pushes you away, it often reveals more about their internal war than about your value. Lesson 4. Never react to rejection. Study it. Dissect it. Find the wound it comes from, and you will never take it personally again. A soldier once asked Marcus why he never seemed angry when denied something by his advisors. The emperor smiled and replied, "To be denied is to be reminded that I do not need." That's lesson 5. The less you need, the more power you hold. Detachment is strength. And when others sense you don't need them, they begin to question why they needed to reject you in the first place. You see, most people beg for re-entry after being shut out. Marcus never begged. He built another door. Or waited until those inside realized the room was colder without him. He played a long game, not to win people over, but to outlast their illusions. There's an almost cruel elegance to this approach. When rejection comes, you lean back. You don't argue, don't explain. You let your silence echo longer than their words. That's lesson 6. Influence is not volume. It's weight. The quieter you are after rejection, the louder your presence becomes. People start to wonder if they made a mistake. Their confidence erodes. They circle back. And when they do, you will have changed, elevated. Rejection didn't destroy you. It refined you. The Stoics taught that the obstacle is the way. But Marcus added a subtle layer. The rejection is the message. It's the cosmos whispering, you are placing your worth in the wrong hands. You shift your focus inward. You rebuild. You make yourself undeniable, not to others, but to yourself. By the 7th lesson, you start to feel it. The power that rises when you're no longer explaining your value, defending your place, justifying your desires. You become deliberate in your movements. Your actions speak. Your absence is a presence. The people who once turned you away now pause. They feel a shift. And they come back, not because you asked them to, but because they now see what you knew all along. This is the paradox of rejection and reverse psychology. When you stop needing them, they need you. When you detach from the outcome bends in your favor. Marcus Aurelius didn't manipulate, he revealed. He exposed the hollowness of ego, of insecurity, of pride in others by simply refusing to participate in it. That was his greatest weapon. That is your path too. He once wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." And in that sentence lies the 8th lesson. Never mirror the behavior of those who reject you. The moment you stoop to resentment, anger, or passive aggression, you surrender the higher ground. You enter their battlefield, where emotion clouds reason. But Marcus? He stood above it. He let rejection become his training ground, not his downfall. He didn't retaliate. He radiated something more powerful, unbothered purpose. In the imperial court, there were men who plotted against him, who whispered behind pillars, who voted against his reforms, not out of logic, but envy. Yet Marcus continued. Not bitterly, not boastfully, but as a river flows past the rocks that try to divert it, persistent, silent, unstoppable. He understood lesson 9. Consistency is the most intimidating answer to rejection. When they expect you to break, and you continue. When they expect you to fade, and you rise, their grip on reality begins to falter. And in that faltering, they question their own judgment. To turn rejection into power is not just about outlasting others. It's about outlasting your former self, the one that once craved approval, feared isolation, begged for permission. Marcus burned that version of himself in the fire of solitude. He found something far more enduring, the clarity that comes when you ask yourself, why does their rejection matter so much to me? He once spent a night alone before a major decision, not with generals, not with philosophers, but with himself, meditating on mortality, on impermanence, on how fleeting approval truly is. That's the 10th lesson. Most rejection is temporary, but your reaction to it can become permanent. Choose wisely. Most people carry scars from rejection not because the wound was deep, but because they kept picking at it. Let it close. Let it become wisdom, not weakness. And here lies the subtle genius of reverse psychology that Marcus never taught with words but lived through his actions. When people see that rejection makes you sharper, calmer, more disciplined, they hesitate to reject you again. Not out of fear, but out of awe. You've taught them, without trying, that you are not desperate to belong. You belong to yourself. And that, in a world addicted to validation, is revolutionary. Lesson 11 is the most dangerous form of influence, not through demand, but through detachment. People do not follow the loudest voice. They follow the one that echoes longest in their mind after silence. Marcus never pleaded for allies. He became the kind of man others regretted rejecting. That's the secret. Become the regret they carry. Not out of vengeance, but because your elevation made their ignorance obvious. Some say he was too calm, that he lacked fire. But those who said that never understood the power of restraint. He did not lack passion. He had mastered its direction. When others burned bridges in anger, Marcus built empires in silence. When others reacted, he reflected. And in doing so, he rewrote the meaning of rejection, from something to be feared to something to be mined for strength. Lesson 12 is simple but rarely lived. Never let rejection close your heart. Harden your resolve, not your spirit. The world will try to teach you that love, honesty, effort, they are liabilities. But Marcus knew otherwise. He never stopped loving Rome, even when Rome rejected his ideals. He never stopped serving, even when unrecognized. That's the kind of strength that turns rejection into reverence, over time, over seasons, beyond death. And now we arrive at the 13th lesson, the final and most profound. Rejection is a gift. A brutal, unwelcome, soul-shaping gift. If you use it, if you don't drown in it, if you don't chase its source with bitterness, use it like Marcus did, to purify your motives, to strengthen your center, to detach from false identities. Let it burn off what was never yours to carry. Because in the end, those who once said no to you may return. But you won't be waiting. You'll be too busy building something rejection cannot touch, a life forged in purpose, shaped by solitude, guided by timeless principles. This story continues, not in Rome, not in books, but in you. In how you respond to being overlooked. In how you transform every closed door into a corridor of self-discovery. Rejection will find you again. The question is, when it does, will you collapse, or will you, like Marcus, write your own legacy in the fire it leaves behind? And somewhere, in that moment of decision, you'll remember, silence, stillness, strength, these are not signs of defeat. They are the beginning of power. So when the next rejection finds you, and it will, don't flinch. Don't respond as the world has trained you to respond. Instead, pause. Breathe. Watch how quickly others rush to defend their rejection, to explain, to justify. But you remain still. Because now you understand, they are not in control. They never were. Rejection is not an ending. It is an unveiling, a peeling away of illusion. And beneath that illusion lies the truth you've been avoiding, that your worth was never up for debate. Marcus Aurelius knew this, not because he was emperor, but because he practiced being human without apology. He embraced discomfort like a sculptor embraces the blade. It cuts, yes, but it reveals form. This was his quiet rebellion against the noise of Rome. The applause didn't move him. The criticism didn't stop him. He was rooted in something deeper, a purpose untouched by approval. It's why the men who mocked him eventually quoted him. It's why the very empire that doubted him turned to his words for guidance when he was gone. And now, centuries later, that same quiet strength calls out to you. Not to be like him, but to remember what he remembered, that you do not need to be accepted to be powerful. You do not need to be invited to build. You are not here to impress. You are here to endure, to refine, to elevate. This is not a lesson for the weak-hearted. It is for those who are ready to stop negotiating with rejection. For those who are tired of shrinking every time they are misunderstood. For those who are willing to walk alone, not as punishment, but as preparation. Rejection isolates you, but it also reveals who you truly are without the noise. That space, though uncomfortable, is sacred. It's where men like Marcus found themselves. So what do you do when the door is closed? You don't knock louder. You build your own. You find your own materials, discipline, integrity, patience. And as you build, others begin to watch. Those who rejected you will wonder how you're still standing, still working, still smiling. What they won't understand is that rejection was never an injury, it was an initiation. The true Stoic, the true master of self, learns to use rejection as fuel, not to destroy, but to deepen, to widen the gap between who you were and who you must become. Rejection doesn't slow you. It sharpens your vision. It removes the distractions. It breaks the illusion that you ever needed to be chosen. You realize now, you choose yourself. There's a hidden dignity in that kind of solitude. It doesn't scream. It doesn't advertise. It simply exists, unshaken, while the world churns with emotion. And one day, when those who turned away look back, they won't see a man broken. They'll see a fortress, quiet, immovable, sovereign. And if you keep walking this path, something strange begins to happen. You no longer fear rejection. You begin to welcome it. You start to see it as a signpost, a compass pointing you inward. A challenge asking, can you be whole even when no one else sees your value? And when you answer yes, not with words, but with how you carry yourself, everything changes. The same world that once turned its back will now follow your shadow. But by then, you won't be chasing their gaze. You'll be far ahead, walking toward something higher, a standard no one can take from you. Rejection didn't break you. It revealed you. And in that revelation, the real story begins. And in that revelation, you find something no approval could ever give you, self-respect that cannot be bargained. You begin to carry yourself differently. Your steps are measured, not rushed. Your speech becomes deliberate, not desperate. You no longer feel the urge to explain yourself to those who dismissed you. Their rejection has already served its purpose. It taught you the value of your own silence. Marcus Aurelius once walked through the marble halls of power, knowing half the men around him wished to see him fail. But what they failed to understand is that rejection, to a Stoic, is not poison, it's purification. Every insult, every dismissal, every cold shoulder, these were not threats to his authority. They were weights he used to build inner muscle, spiritual posture, unshakable calm. So you, too, begin to use rejection like a craftsman uses friction, not to feel pain, but to sharpen the edge. You begin to separate yourself from the crowd, not out of pride, but because your vision no longer fits into their limited gaze. You don't rise by pleading for inclusion. You rise by becoming undeniable in your absence. They will feel it, your stillness, your growth, your distance. Some will try to return, not because they've changed, but because you have. They sense the shift, the quiet power, the unyielding presence that can no longer be swayed by opinions or excluded by the weak judgment of the masses. But you won't need them anymore. And that's when you'll know you've truly mastered it, when you can open the door, not to let them in, but to walk out and never look back. By then, rejection won't even register as pain. It'll register as opportunity. An alert that you're on the edge of transformation. Each no will become a torch, lighting the corners of your character you hadn't yet explored. And those dark places, those forgotten edges, will become the most powerful parts of you. There's a sacred elegance in this. The art of becoming untouchable not through resistance, but through refinement. The Stoics never sought armor. They became the mountain the storm could not move. And in your journey, you will become the same. A force not of reaction, but of quiet, disciplined momentum. And then, one day, you will sit in silence, maybe not in a Roman palace, but perhaps in a quiet room, a rooftop under a cold sky, a moment between chapters, and you will realize something profound. All that rejection you once feared was the greatest ally you ever had. It kept you honest. It kept you working. It kept you focused. And perhaps the most Stoic thought of all will arrive, not as a shout, but as a whisper. Had they not rejected me, I would never have become this. And so you rise, not in defiance, but in stillness. not to prove them wrong, but to prove yourself right. Because now you know, rejection never defined you. It refined you. There's a moment every person reaches if they endure long enough, a moment where the echoes of past rejection no longer sting, but teach. You'll look back at the names, the faces, the cold replies, the doors closed without warning, and instead of anger, you'll feel gratitude. Because in the quiet they left behind, you heard your own voice more clearly than ever before. In the void of their absence, you found your inner presence. They walked away, but you stepped inward. Marcus Aurelius knew this, felt this, lived this. His entire reign was a series of losses, of loyalty, of love, of illusions. And yet, he ruled not from the need to be adored, but from the strength of solitude. The rejection he faced from men, he answered with discipline, with restraint, with presence. That is the mark of mastery. And it is yours now, if you choose it. You will begin to see rejection not as a judgment of your value, but as a filtering of your path. What's not meant to stay leaves. What is false falls away. And what remains is what's true. What's worthy. What's yours. You no longer seek revenge. You no longer fantasize about proving your doubters wrong. You've outgrown all that. Not because you've become soft, but because you've become focused. You're not here to win their attention. You're here to win your freedom. And the irony is, the more detached you become from the approval of others, the more magnetic you become to those who once overlooked you. But by the time they return, you will have outgrown the need for their recognition. You will see them not with resentment, but with compassion. Because you will understand, they were never rejecting you. They were reacting to their own limits, their own fears, their own inability to recognize what you were becoming. And now, what you have become is something rejection cannot reach. You are not bitter. You are better. Not harder, but deeper. Not louder, but clearer. You speak with less urgency, because you no longer fear being unheard. You move with less haste, because you're no longer trying to arrive somewhere others can applaud. You're already where you need to be, within yourself, steady, immovable. Marcus wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." But he could have added, "If it does not accept you, do not chase it." You've learned the lessons now. 13 of them, yes, but also countless others, whispered between the lines of silence, carried by every closed door, every unanswered message, every moment you were passed over. Those moments shaped you more than applause ever could. And here you are, not as a survivor of rejection, but as someone who turned it into power. A quiet, irreversible kind of power. The kind that doesn't announce itself, it radiates. The kind that isn't desperate to be seen, because it sees everything, especially the truth. And the truth is this. Rejection did not stop you. It started you. ChatGPT said, "It started you, not as the person you once hoped to be, molded by approval, softened by compromise, but as the person you were always meant to become. Not filtered through the expectations of others, but forged in the silence where nobody clapped, nobody called, and still, you stood up anyway. That is where real identity forms. In the quiet rise. In the cold dawn. In the unnoticed effort. And from that effort comes something no one can deny. Presence. You no longer need introductions, explanations, or defense. You walk into rooms with the weight of someone who knows exactly who they are, and that shakes the walls more than any applause ever could. This is where Marcus Aurelius and every Stoic before and after him arrives at the same truth. True power is not what you gain after rejection, but what you become during it. When you are stripped of recognition, and you still give your best. When no one believes in you, and yet you sharpen your craft. When doors close, and you turn inward and build temples no hand can knock down. You are now the keeper of something most people never reach, unshakable self-trust. the kind that comes from walking through fire and not just surviving, but transmuting, the kind that no amount of praise can increase and no amount of insult can diminish. It simply is. Like stone, like truth, like the sun rising, whether anyone watches or not. And so, now when rejection comes again, and it will, you will not fear it. You will welcome it, quietly. You will nod at it like an old companion, a necessary visitor, a sacred test. You will feel the sting, but it will not touch your center. It will not unmake you. You've traveled too far within for that. Perhaps someone turns away.